Your Excellencies, members of United Nations family, representatives from government agencies, business community, and academia, distinguished guests, on behalf of everyone at Center for China and Globalization, welcome you all. On this very special day for all women and girls in China and the world, we are honored and delighted to collaborate with UN Women in China to be hosting a symposium on biodiversity and climate change from a gender perspective. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to UN Women China for giving us enormous support on making this event happen. It was highlighted that both COP15 and COP26 last year, that as crises that Earth confronts have become more severe and urgent to be dealt with every day. A framework that delivers sustainable development that aims to include gender consideration and bend the curve in equality that women have been facing is desperately needed. Studies have shown that gender disparities everywhere have been causing unfair and inadequate access to resources, and many women's livelihoods in rural areas tend to be climate sensitive. And this is a topic will be at the center of the roundtable this afternoon and later. What I would like to stress today is that the world is in need of a wake-up call for the psychological and cultural factors that have been enabling the unjust treatment against women and the importance of women's role in enabling a more sustainable future for the mankind and our motherland. As Chinese say, 大地之母, to fully realize women's rights along the way of sustainable development. We have to up the perspective to a macro level. Just as the concept of ecological civilization have been emphasized in recent years, the idea of a harmony with nature has been existing in our culture for a long time. The ancient Chinese philosophy of yin-yang implies a perfect combination of two forces that complement each other and make up all aspects of life and nature as a whole. Just as the yin represents the unique female energy and softness, women have a natural connection to the mother nature. Today, addressing the global challenge requires the same logic. The world needs women's sensitiveness. Women's voice should weigh more on the decision-making of global governance matters and on issues that are related to protecting our planet Earth. Views from women should also be taken into more consideration into the process of inclusive globalization and multilateralism. For women have always been the more tolerant and compassionate gender. As a global think tank, Center for China and Globalization has been showing robust support for the pursuit of SDGs and female empowerment, especially that of female think tankers. More than half our leadership team and employees are female, and we have put great weight on promoting the development of female talents. We as a think tank believes in the power of women and will continue to strive for promoting women's voice and bettering the position of women in our society. CCG and the United Nations agencies in China have also embraced great friendship and built a bond for many years. We really appreciate the support and collaboration with the United Nations China. Most recently, we have supported the United Nations Women's He for Her campaign, just we mentioned, in China. And last November, our symposium to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the restoration of PRC's lawful seat in the United Nations were joined by many members of the United Nations family in China. As the only think tank in China granted special consultative status by the United Nations and one of the world's top 100 think tanks, CCG has been actively on conducting research on international development, global governance, and promoting SDGs and multilateralism in many occasions. I sincerely hope that CCG can play a role in contributing to the process of gender equality, climate action, and life on land, and 3 important SDGs being translated into reality. And the friendship between us and the United Nations family will flourish. I want to thank United Nations Women China and Mrs. Miriti. Thank you very much again for your work and leadership. And thank all the participants for taking your time to come to support our initiative. Finally, I want to thank all the women who have been working tirelessly on empowering herself and her peers, as well as the men, like today, sit here, who have been supporting the female community. I wish our afternoon discussion to be a success. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dr. Miao. Next, please join me in welcoming Ms. Smriti IL, Country Representative UN Women China, to the podium for opening address.
Thank you, Dr. An and Dr. Miao, for that excellent introduction and welcome. Excellencies, representative from the government of China, distinguished guests, partners, colleagues from the United Nations, a very good afternoon. On behalf of UN Women, let me first welcome you to this event. And I would like to also extend our thanks, heartfelt thanks to CCG, particularly Dr. Miao, Dr. An, and the entire team who have worked with us over the month preparing for this meeting today. As we know, today is International Women's Day, 8th of March. And it's a day to celebrate women's leadership, women's contribution to this world and to the planet. And this year's theme is Gender Equality Today for Sustainable Tomorrow. It is the global theme. Even though this celebration is taking place at a troubled time in the world, our work must go on. So let me take this opportunity to first acknowledge and honor many women in this room, outside the room, in China, and everywhere around the world, who have relentlessly contributed and worked towards betterment of the world. Today, I want to highlight about why climate change and gender. It's a question I'm often asked because sometimes the linkages are not very clear. So, forgive me if there are some data, because evidence should always inform a discussion. So, we all know that the impact of climate change and environmental degradation is never gender neutral, like everything else. Women are 14 times more likely to die during a disaster than men. 80% of climate refugees around the world are women. Women make up 43% of agricultural workforce, playing a central role in biodiversity conservation, sustainable food system. But only 20% of women own land. And only about 22% of those living in rural areas in low-income countries have access to mobile phones. So one can imagine how far we are from really ensuring women can play a productive role in agricultural transformation. These statistics are telling. They indicate that women encounter structural inequalities. And what do I mean by that? Informal nature of work, informal businesses, low-paying jobs, livelihood insecurity, especially when crisis and disasters hit or when pandemic hits, like the one we're facing today. They also face high burden of unpaid care work and household work, and sometimes gender-based violence. All of these factors limiting their access to resources and information, which not only puts them more at vulnerability to deal with and to cope with climate shocks, but also if it affects their ability to participate and contribute to climate actions. And yet, this brings to my second point, the data around the world indicates that when women are indeed empowered, given the resources they need, it makes climate action more effective. UN Women did a global analysis just released last week ahead of the Commission on Status of Women, which will start very soon in a few days. And we have some data that I think is pertinent to our conversation. Number one, when women participate at the local level, it results into better outcome in natural resource management and climate interventions. Simply having more women parliamentarians elected and represented in policy making leads to adoption of more stringent climate policies, resulting in lower emissions. Including women in local forest committees, it's as simple as including them in local forest committees, improves information and communication on the need for conservation, including to convey conservation ethics to children at the community level, improves community monitoring of forest protection, and application of indigenous knowledge around biodiversity protection. However, unfortunately, and this is my third point, is that current climate actions have glaring gender gap in terms of policies, programs, and investment. Firstly, only 15% of environmental-related ministries have female minister. And why does it matter? Because the mathematics is simple. When there is low level of participation in climate governance and decision-making, it means absence of women's voice, and it means insufficient consideration on gender equality in policy making and laws. The progress on globally agreed gender commitment under the convention, the UN Convention on Climate Change, NDCs, shows that only 20% of 122 countries identify national gender equality institution important to the climate governance, or only 27% of countries feel that women's participation is important in the agenda. That's very, we have a long ways to go. If we look at the climate financing architecture around the world, most big ones, there has been some progress mentioned in terms of including gender considerations in the project design. But there is lack of data around whether or not these considerations actually bring more financing for programs to transform women's life. It's a massive challenge. SDG Agenda 2030 is about transformation. So we have a long way to go. Finally, an important point, which is very important, there is a massive data gap in terms of sex disaggregated data in the climate and environment field, which obviously affects informed policy making and investment decisions. So these are the issues and challenges. Of course, where there are challenges, there are always solutions, and I would like to propose 4 areas for our considerations. The first one, let's work together to do better in terms of analyzing, collecting, using, and disseminating gender disaggregated data and gender statistics in a systematic way. This is foundational for policy making and prioritizing investments, and to ensure that environmental policies and programs reflect emphasis for strengthening resilience and adaptive capacities of women and girls. The second is around coordination and gender mainstreaming across all sectors and all levels of government for integrated formulation and implementation of gender-responsive climate actions. This includes gender equality standards, different ministries working together, gender capacity development of governments at all levels, and adequate funding for implementation, including in international development cooperation. My fourth point is around focusing on building women's resilience, especially for women who are working in informal sector, who are most vulnerable to socioeconomic shocks. We need to focus on improving their livelihoods and income, strengthening social protection benefits, ensuring equal access to information, training, tools. And that includes climate smart agriculture, tools, and digital technology, which are still a major gap and an issue for women around the world. To better address this, one area that I really want to emphasize when we talk about resilience building is the small and medium-sized enterprise. They are the backbone of the economy. So making sure they have access to financing, that includes diverse financial instruments, concessional loan, risk guarantees, and grants. That will accelerate process for a better economic development, a recovery from COVID pandemic, but also benefit the women. The fifth area is utilizing women's real and potential capabilities in the green transition that is taking place around the world. Environmental sustainability itself could create 24 new jobs, 24 million jobs globally. And we need to invest in preparing women through upskilling and reskilling so that they are fit to deliver. And that's how we utilize the full potential of half of the world population. Finally, I see there is a tremendous and a very unique opportunity in China. At last year's COP15 in Kunming, President Xi Jinping committed to establishing $232 million fund for biodiversity protection in developing countries. Given the essential role that women play in forestry, in fishery, in land management, in water resource management, and renewable energy, this is a great opportunity to enhance targeted support towards promising women's empowerment-centric programs that are win-win. And they are win-win both for climate change, biodiversity protection, as well as for SDG 5, which is gender equality. Moreover, with China's global leadership on climate change and with the rapid economic development and progress we have seen in a number of areas, poverty alleviation, rural revitalization, digital innovation, green development, the country could truly be a model for green transition that is also gender just. And as UN Women, we stand together with our UN agencies to support all relevant stakeholders to integrate and implement gender equality commitments in climate and environmental actions towards realizing the international and national commitments and Agenda 2030. At last, I thank you, Excellencies and distinguished guests, once again for joining us today and for CCG to create this platform to have this conversation and all the logistic support to make it happen. Thank you sincerely on behalf of UN Women. We have many outstanding speakers, and I hope at the end we walk away with some consensus on critical actions to advance on these two very important interlinked global and national agendas. Thank you so much once again. 谢谢. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Smriti, for your emphatic speech. Moving forward, we'll have 4 special addresses by our guest speakers today. Once again, I will turn over to Dr. Mabel Miao, CCG Secretary General, for their introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Smriti. You delivered a wonderful speech. And we know a lot of information of women's participation of the climate change and the biodiversity. It's a crucial information for us to know more. Yeah. Next, we would like to invite some very important figures to deliver the special address. And firstly, we know the Ministry of Ecology and the Environment is at the center of the Chinese government's environmental protection efforts, leading the making and the implementation of climate and the environmental policies and the enforcement of relevant laws. This work cannot be done without involving women as climate action champion working at various levels of society. We are honored to welcome Mr. Li Gao, Director General, Climate Change Adaptation Department, Ministry of Ecology and Environment, to share more with us in a video message. We know this time is the political season in China. The two sessions is happening. But Mr. Li Gao would like to support our event and support women participation in climate change and biodiversity. So he gave us a video message. Please see the video.
Distinguished guests and colleagues, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to attend the event hosted by UN Women Country Office in China and Center for China and Globalization. First of all, on behalf of the Climate Change Department of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment, I would like to extend my holiday greetings to all the ladies, and I would like to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt thanks to all friends, in particular to ladies, for your care and support for addressing climate change. Since China celebrated the International Women's Day for the first time 98 years ago, especially since the founding of the People's Republic of China, the history of suppression of women for thousands of years ended. Chinese women have held up half the sky, pioneering and contributing to the construction, reform, and development of society. There is a natural link between women and climate change. Women are more sensitive and vulnerable faced with the adverse effect of climate change, and empowering women is a crucial element in addressing climate change. At COP26 in Glasgow last year, it was agreed that recognizing that the full, meaningful, and equal participation and leadership of women in all aspects of UNFCCC process and in national and local level climate policy and action is vital for achieving long-term climate goals. We have seen that women are shining brightly in the climate change arena. Many women representatives have played a leading role in the negotiation and implementation of the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. Gender equality and women's empowerment also become important agenda items in various international environmental and climate change processes. Climate change is a major global challenge, and China has always attached great importance to addressing climate change. President Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that addressing climate change is not what others make us to do, but we must do it ourselves. It's the essential requirement of sustainable development, as well as the undertaking towards building the community of shared future for mankind. Since September 22nd, 2020, President Xi Jinping has made a serious major announcement on China's carbon dioxide peaking and carbon neutrality. The relevant goals and tasks have been included in the 14th Five-Year Plan and the Vision 2035 of China. China's 1+N policy system for carbon dioxide peaking and carbon neutrality is speeding up to be established. The working guidance for carbon dioxide peaking and carbon neutrality in full and faithful implementation of the new development philosophy and action plan for carbon dioxide peaking before 2030 have been officially released. Implementation plans on energy, industry, construction, transportation, and other key areas will be issued, and corresponding policies on taxation, finance and technology, and carbon sinks, etc., will be introduced. Meanwhile, China has always contributed to building an equitable, reasonable, cooperative, and win-win global climate governance system in a positive and constructive manner, and will continue to contribute China's wisdom and solutions for it. The Climate Change Department of the Ministry of Ecology and Environment is faithfully implements the national strategy to actively address climate change and actively participates in the formulation of the 1+N policy system for carbon dioxide peaking and carbon neutrality. In 2021, we submitted the China's Achievement, New Goals, and New Measures for Nationally Determined Contributions, China's mid-century long-term low greenhouse gas emissions development strategy, and released the white paper responding to climate change, China's policies and actions, and launched the national carbon market. In 2022, we will release the 14th Five-Year Plan for Addressing Climate Change and the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy 2035. Promote the legislation on addressing climate change and strengthen the control of non-carbon dioxide greenhouse gases such as methane. In the meantime, we will continue to actively promote climate change South-South cooperation, helping other developing countries to enhance their capacities to address climate change. Colleagues, President Xi Jinping said, "Help women to be builders of great causes, advocates of civilization, and strivers to pursue their dreams." In the field of climate change, Chinese women have already held up half the sky at the national and local levels and in public and private sectors, social organizations, and international institutions. Exactly. Women are indispensable in combating climate change and achieving sustainable development. We will work with all stakeholders to further promote gender equality in addressing climate change and encourage and support women to undertake key roles and contribute their wisdom and strength. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the video message from DG Mr. Li Gao. Next, we would like to invite another very important person to deliver speech. We know the Ministry of Emergency Management, MEM, works to forestall and diffuse major disaster risks in China and to improve disaster relief, as women are both acutely affected by the increasing climate disaster risks and also working actively at the front line of disaster rescue and relief. The work of MEM is extremely relevant to the women's empowerment agenda. We are delighted to welcome Hu Yuhong, Deputy Head of the Center of International Cooperation and representatives of Ministry of Emergency Management, to share more with us. 欢迎胡女士。Welcome.
Good afternoon. 我今天还是用中文。
I prefer Mandarin to speak to all of you. Respected Madame Maseri and Director Miao from CCG, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. At this very beautiful season of spring, we are having the celebration for the International Women's Day. I'm very delighted to attend today's meeting to talk with all of you. According to the agenda, I will take the podium to present you the work on the gender equality from MEM perspective, the achievements as well as our experiences. About 4 years ago, since the inception of the MEM, we've been engaged with the disaster relief and the restoration. And we put emphasis on the awareness of the gender equality into legislature as well as the public governance. We emphasize the rights protection of the women to give full role to be played by the women. In our course of work, first of all, we are enhancing the publicity and awareness enhancement and to protect the environment and also the rights of the interest of the women during the course of the disaster relief. And also, we have set up the National Day of Disaster Relief and Prevention. And also, we enhance the campaigns of training of the skills for the women so that the women in the community can enhance their awareness of the self-protection and self-assistance during the course of disasters so that they can enjoy the relevant solutions of the prevention of disasters. And we also put emphasis on the special requirements, demands of the women during the disasters, especially the material supply to the women in need. We also emphasize on the women who have breastfeeding to their babies, and we focus on the needs of them. Secondly, we also take care of the employees, the female employees, in terms of the public welfare security. We also put emphasis on the work environment for the women. And we work with relevant organizations and agencies to guarantee the workplace as well as the regular physical check and put them into the regular mechanisms of the inspections. And also, we set up special campaigns for those toxic workplace, especially toxic workplace where women usually working there. And we also have set up several special campaigns and phased out those not up to a standard workplace, and also to phase out those skills which are not suitable for the security and health of the women. We also have added and to give the supplies of those materials in need of those female workers. Also, we have put emphasis on the management. In terms of the prevention of disasters, we fully engage with the female in the communities and prevent and to control the risks from the grassroots. We also have set up several education mechanisms. And after the disaster happens, we will organize the teams of the mental health as well as the vulnerable groups guarantee and restoration of the homes and houses of the people in the community, including women. And we are also working on the standardization of this disaster relief and the disaster prevention. And the ratio of the women in those teams should also be guaranteed as equally as possible to the men. And the safety standards has to be nailed down for the women's interests and rights. In 2021, October, we have held the video conference of the Belt and Road Initiative, the MEM, Ministerial Work Forum. The relevant ministers have reached a consensus on organizing the different campaigns for the climate change mitigations as well as the relevant social works, which has been exerting a lot of influence in the international arena. In terms of the disaster prevention, we also have compiled the Beijing Declaration and put people at the center to organize the different works in coordination with each other for the sustainable development in the society, especially put emphasis on the rights and interest protection of the women. And we are deeply feeling that the strategy's implementation should take care of the conditions of the nation, the gender inequality, and different conditions of the different localities. And we have to be innovative in terms of the decision-making and policy making to protect the interests and rights of the women and to engage the women to fully participate into this decision-making. And on one hand, we have to make them more excited and more energetic and encourage. And also, we have to guarantee the sense of fulfillment as well as the happiness of the women. And the second, we can enhance the social status and the gender equality by doing these jobs. And also we can make sure these social works can be sustainable by participation of the women. So in the future, we will continue carrying out the principle of President Xi Jinping in terms of the protection of the rights and interests of the women, as well as the relevant documents and outlines of the women's rights and interests to guarantee and protect the rights, legitimate rights of the women. And we will also give full play to the MEM during this course. Thank you. Thank you.
At the international level, the China International Development Cooperation Agency, also known as CIDCA, formulates strategic guidelines, plans, and policies for foreign aid and supervises the implementation of bilateral and multilateral aid programs. Let us welcome Ms. Cai Fang, Deputy Director General of International Cooperation, China International Development Cooperation Agency, to share with us how women are an indispensable part of China's international climate cooperation. 下面我们有请
Next, I'd like to give the floor to Madame Cai Fang from the CIDCA.
Thank you, Dr. Miao Lu. Distinguished President Wang Huiyao and Mrs. Smriti Ariel, distinguished ambassadors and envoys, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to be with you all today on this special occasion of International Women's Day. And sincere gratitude goes to the Center for China and Globalization and to UN Women for holding this seminar. I am from CIDCA, China International Development Cooperation Agency. CIDCA is under the State Council, being responsible for China's international development cooperation. I'm just having about 4 minutes, so please allow me to take this precious time to do some promotion for China's international development cooperation and for CIDCA from the perspective of gender equality and climate change. First, a few words on China's global anti-COVID-19 endeavors. Since last year, China has carried out the largest emergent humanitarian assistance in history. We have sent large amount of medical supplies to more than 150 countries and 13 international organizations. We provide over 2 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines to more than 120 countries, ranking the first globally. President Xi Jinping's commitment has been fulfilled to turn COVID-19 vaccines into a global public good. And for gender equality, which is always a lofty ideal for mankind, an ideal at least for all women. Am I right? To boost the status of women in other developing countries, we have implemented 100 development projects for women and children in countries like Cambodia, Sierra Leone, Malawi, and Rwanda. We sent expert teams to help local women medical workers to improve their professional skills. We support women's capacity building. We set up master's degree and doctor's degree scholarship and short-term training courses, especially designed for women, to enhance their capacity to take part in the nation's political, social, and economic activities. We support women in their fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Under the South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund, we cooperated with international organizations like UNICEF, UNFPA, UNDP, WFP, providing nutrition and food aid and essential medical assistance to women. Now we come to climate change. China embraces the philosophy of eco-civilization and harmonious coexistence of human and nature, and has been actively implementing clean energy projects and environmental protection projects for other developing countries, sharing our experiences in green development, in wildlife protection, and in combating desertification. We supported Kenya in building solar energy power stations. We helped Fiji build hydropower stations. We provide in-kind aid to protect wildlife and to fight against illegal hunting and the trading of wildlife products in Zimbabwe and Zambia. We help the Laos shift towards clean energy. We donated microsatellite to Ethiopia to improve the country's capacity for early warning and for monitoring natural disasters. We established hydrometeorological observation projects for Jamaica. We helped Uzbekistan build automatic weather station and support research in marine hazard prevention. Ladies and gentlemen, joint, incessant, and tenacious efforts are required for advancing gender equality, global environmental governance, and the realization of UN 2030 SDGs. Let's join in hands to take immediate action to build a better world for all women, for all people, and for all species on Earth. Finally, let me express my gratitude once again to CCG and UN Women for providing us such a wonderful platform to exchange views. I wish you all a happy International Women's Day and wish this event a complete success. I thank you. 谢谢。
非常感谢蔡芳司长。
Thank you very much, Madam Cai Fang. Thank you for your wonderful presentation, and thank you for your introduction about China's contribution to women and to the world. And I'd like to introduce the next speaker.
In dedicating to philanthropic projects including family empowerment and poverty eradication. The foundation has been also established scholarship to provide support for students, teachers, and education projects. In 2020, Ms. Kong Dongmei won the China Charity Award, the highest level government award in the field of public welfare and charity in China. Let's welcome Ms. Kong Dongmei, founder and chairwoman, Dongmei Foundation, to give us more insights on women's empowerment in the philanthropy.
尊敬的
Madam Smriti, Mr. Wang Huiyao, Madam Mabel Miao, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I want to thank the UN Women and CCG for the invitation to join you in the celebration of the International Women's Day, and I'm also looking forward to exchanging views with all of you on this important topic about gender equality and sustainable future. Just recently, the IPCC issued the report, Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaptation and Vulnerability, stressing that climate change is creating dangerous and extensive damages on nature. About 3.3 billion to 3.6 billion globally are living in the highly climate change vulnerable environment. The more frequent hot waves, droughts, and floods have really overwhelmed the limits of wildlife, leading to the death of a lot of trees and coral species. And the extreme weathers and disasters have also happened in a more extensive manner, aggravating the water and food crisis for millions of people. So that has created very hard potential impacts. In order to address such impacts, people around the world need to work together. Since the Paris Accord was adopted in 2015, countries committed to the 2-degree temperature rise. But actually, there is still a large gap. And according to WMO, 7 years after the Paris Accord was signed, we experienced the hottest year in 7 years, and global warming and other climate change trends will continue. In 2021, at the COP26 in Glasgow, parties finally reached the packaged solution for the implementation of Paris Accord, at the same time making important progress in adaptation and funding and other topics. China and the United States have also issued the joint statement during the conference, committing to joint efforts to strengthen the implementation of the Paris Accord. Actually, today the international community's consensus on addressing climate change is also a part of the Chinese traditional philosophy. For example, everything should live in harmony in order to live a better life, and everything needs to be better cared for in order to be successful. And President Xi Jinping has also talked about the community of shared future for mankind, as well as green is gold. And this is the Chinese solution to environmental governance, and it is also Chinese effort to upgrade China's participation in global governance. As an active promoter and practitioner on climate change, China attached great importance to addressing climate change. In 2020, China announced that before 2030, we will reach carbon peak, and before 2060, we will achieve carbon neutrality, and we will use about 30 years from carbon peak to carbon neutrality, and that will involve a lot of work. Climate change has really created the greater frequency and severity of extreme weathers. For example, in 2021, we experienced the Henan torrential rain and the Shanxi torrential rain. Since the disasters took place in those places, Doran Foundation made a donation of 11 million yuan to Henan and Shanxi to help them in disaster relief. And we have also helped the damaged schools and helped them to repair and reconstruct the schools. And when we are involved in the disaster relief, facing the deaths and losses of properties, and we have a deep feeling that climate change is really posing great threat to human welfare and the health of the planet. Climate crisis also has made it more vulnerable for women to suffer. The UNEP, UN Women, and UNDP have issued a new report. It is called Gender, Climate, and Security, Maintaining Inclusive Peace at the Forefront of Climate Change. It indicates the interconnectedness between gender, climate, and security. It points out that women and girls are facing very bad economic burdens, and it also stressed that women who are at the forefront of climate actions have an important role to play in preventing conflicts and sustainable inclusiveness and peace. The Doran Foundation is committed to promoting educational equity and gender equality, and we are helping the underdeveloped regions, the ethnic minority young people, and help them to improve their education. And we help those poor families to educate their children better. And in particular, we pay much attention to the girls, and we provide more learning resources to them and create better education opportunities to them. And girls are the future mothers, so the education of girls is key. And to empower the girls is to empower women. Our foundation has provided scholarships, libraries, and other forms of support to Xinjiang and also some other counties in China to improve the educational equity and help tens of thousands of girls. And in the Tibetan area of Sichuan, it faced the most severe global warming challenges. And there is a county called Luhuo in Sichuan. There is a village with an altitude of 3,500 meters. It was a very poor county. In June 2021, my foundation and me carried out a project. It is for the poor mothers and their girls. Lots of families are actually single mother families there. They are caring for many children, but they are not very well educated, and the fertility rate is very high, and the health is not very good, so they do not have good ability to adapt to climate change or other social and economic impacts. And climate change has also increased their work time and family burdens. But these mothers support their children in education. So we use this project to help them to improve their living and learning conditions so that poverty will not go on. In Beijing, we have a new lifestyle here that is called zero waste. We have more and more young people who start from their own life. For example, they classify waste. They turn the waste into usable things, and they are reducing waste. My daughter Nina is such a practitioner, and now she is a student in junior high school, and now she is promoting the zero waste concept. There have been a lot of changes in her life. For example, she uses the soaps instead of the shampoos, and she uses the toothpaste pieces instead of the tubes of toothpaste. And she also used some waste paper for compost. And she has never bought any blind boxes or toys like this anymore since she started to practice zero waste lifestyle. And actually, we are guided by the big goals of carbon neutrality and carbon peak. Nina and other young people in China are paying more and more attention to environment in their life, and more people have realized that their life is closely related to the environment, and no longer climate change is a slogan. It is in the action of everybody. So our foundation will work together with all parties, including the UN Women, to create a more sustainable future. That is all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Kong Dongmei, for your wonderful sharing. You have given us vivid examples to show that you have used your projects to support China's poor regions, and you also told your growth story. It is a very good story.
Later we can share more. Thank you very much, Ms. Kong Dongmei, and your contribution to our topic, contribution to the gender perspective on biodiversity and climate change from a gender perspective. 好，我这一部分呢
，So much for my part. Next, I'd like to invite Madame Smriti Iran, the country representative of UN Women.
Thank you very much. And very inspiring speech, and I think there is a lot of message. I know we're behind the schedule a little bit, so I will, hopefully we can take on the messages coming from our government representative as well as from Ms. Kong to take forward our conversation. So without further ado, let me please move into our next session, which I am moderating, and it's my great honor to have such esteemed panelists today with me. We have 4 panelists, and I will quickly introduce. So forgive me, Excellency, I'm sure I will not say your last name correctly. It's similar to mine. I feel your pain because nobody can pronounce my name right. So please welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Helena Sageland. Sorry. She is the ambassador of Sweden to China and to Mongolia since 2019. Previously, she has served in many senior positions, including as the ambassador of Sweden to Iran and to Malaysia. And Sweden, as we all know, probably is the first feminist government in the world, and gender equality is central to everything Sweden does in terms of government decision-making and resource allocation. So I'm very much delighted to have you here today to hear about the experience from Sweden, about how Sweden has prioritized gender equality and climate action. Our next speaker, His Excellency Ambassador James Kimono. I hope I pronounced it right. I'm getting sweaty because I feel nervous pronouncing names incorrectly. Ambassador James is from Rwanda, the Republic of Rwanda. He's the ambassador to China and a non-resident ambassador to the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, to the Republic of Pakistan, and to North Korea. He's also been a very senior bureaucrat, serving for many years in different parts of the world, including as ambassador to the United States previously, to the Republic of Kenya and South Africa. I don't know how many our guests here know, but Rwanda is among the top 10 countries in the world for closing a gender gap. That's a massive milestone. In 2022, that's this last year, or last 2 years ago, they ranked 7th. And they are close to closing about 80% of the gender gap. That's massive progress, given how the country has come out of a turmoil period since 1994. So congratulations, and we're very much looking forward to hearing how Rwanda has achieved this, particularly in working with rural women. Welcome, Ambassador, once again. Our third panelist, Ms. Beate Trankman. She is the UNDP resident representative for China, and previously she was the UN resident coordinator and UNDP resident representative for Mongolia. And she's a senior UN official who has been many different senior positions and leadership role in UNDP. Previously, she's also worked with the European Institute for Asian Studies. And her actually master's degree, I think she also has a deep history of Chinese, and she speaks Chinese very well. I'm always impressed by her Chinese, so I should add that part. Welcome, Beate, if I may call you since you're a colleague. So Beate, welcome once again. UNDP, as we know, is working globally on governance. That's one of the stay among many agenda, and of course climate change is one of a big priority globally as well as in China. So I will be very interested to hear about how you're working in China on the implementation of SDG principles, both as UNDP and as well as through the Sustainable Cooperation Development Framework with the government of China that UN has as a co-chair of the Planet Working Group. So looking forward to hearing from you, Beate. Finally, but last not the least, Dr. Shenggen Fan, I hope I did it well, yes, who's the chair professor and a dean of academic of global food economics and policy at China Agricultural University. He's a senior professor and dean, of course, with a breadth of experience in food as applied economics and in agricultural field, He is currently the member of United Nations Leading Group for Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. He was also a member, vice chair, and chair of Food and Nutrition Council of World Economic Forum. And I know you are a gender champion, and you champion for women farmers. Since I've heard you speak in a number of occasions, Professor, it is a great honor to have you here, and I really look forward to hearing from your experience and expertise about how to further advance this agenda in China. So with that, let me please warmly welcome all of our panelists again. Thank you. Now, I will move to Ambassador Helena. You have the floor. Thank you.
Yes, the microphone is on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, I'm very grateful for CCG and for UN Women to have this opportunity to join a very, very, very interesting and highly relevant event and to celebrate the International Women's Day together with all of you. It's been very inspiring to listen to previous speakers on actions taken to tackle these sustainable development challenges that gender inequality poses. And as many before me have said, it's clear that women's and girls' limited access to political, economic, and material resources has a negative impact on their ability to adapt to climate change, and that in turn increases their vulnerability. This applies particularly in relation to agriculture and food security, where women bear often the main responsibility. Women and girls, however, are also critical actors and agents for change in the work to counteract climate change. That's why Sweden was the driving force behind the inclusion of a gender perspective in the Paris Agreement and contributed to enabling women from all over the world to make their voices heard in connection with the negotiations. Within the major multilateral environmental and climate funds, Sweden has contributed to linking the climate and gender perspective. Gender equality is a human right and ultimately a question of democracy, representation, and social justice. That's why the Swedish government, as the first country in the world, rightly so you said, Smitri, launched a feminist foreign policy that was already in 2014. Since then, many countries have actually followed suit. The Swedish feminist foreign policy has been and continues to be an important tool to integrate gender equality and related issues into essentially all of our policy areas. Gender equality is not only a goal in itself, but also essential in achieving the government's foreign policy objectives of peace, security, and sustainable development. Thus, Sweden has stepped up efforts to integrate the environmental and climate perspective with the gender perspective in Swedish development cooperation. Many of our bilateral cooperation programs within environment and climate have gender clear equality perspectives or clear gender equality perspectives. It means, for instance, taking into account that women and men suffer different exposure to chemicals and pollutants. It means ensuring equal rights to environmental related information for all. It means promoting women's and girls' full enjoyment of human rights in climate and environment and in environment action linked to oceans, biodiversity, food security, water, sanitation, and hygiene. It's essential to improve gender equality in climate adaptation measures and, very importantly, strengthening indigenous peoples' positions within environmental issues to better utilize their knowledge and observations that are valuable in the global fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. Sweden will step up its efforts to prevent climate change and its effects on food security and environment, and to promote sustainable living conditions. The guiding principle of all Sweden's development cooperation is that it's socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable and gender equal. Lastly, I'd like to mention that in June this year, Sweden will, together with Kenya, host the high-level Stockholm Plus 50 conference to commemorate the 1972 UN Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm. The aim of the conference is to help redefine our relationship to nature through concrete actions. To ensure success, a rights-based approach that includes women's and girls' perspectives as an integral part of the work and implementation is essential. You're all very welcome to join in person or digitally. Thank you for your attention. 谢谢.
Thank you, Ambassador Helenas. We will now move to His Excellency Ambassador James Kimono, please.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by wishing your view a very happy International Women's Day, and thank my sister Smriti and Dr. Mabel for inviting me to be part of this important symposium. I just want to say that what Rwanda has achieved in terms of women empowerment and ensuring that we deal with that specific problem that we're discussing of climate change, it all begins at the level of institutions, and very critical is political will. So globally we have a number of decisions from Beijing Declaration, platform for action, then we have SDGs, we have decisions in the AU, decisions at African Union, Commonwealth, and so on and so forth. But I think the challenge we are facing is reluctance. We need to face the status quo. We have all the instruments and tools to empower women to be able to resist all these challenges that we are talking about. And in 2003, when we passed our first constitution a few years after the genocide, the provision in the constitution for women to be in parliament was only 30%. 5 years later, the number went up to 46. Another round of elections from 46 to 54. The following cycle, 64, now 61. And we didn't change the constitution. The reason why the numbers went up is precisely because women demonstrated unusual capabilities to deliver and perform for their constituencies. And therefore, it is a question of opening this heavy curtain that is blocking us from seeing the potential we have among our sisters and mothers and nieces, those who are educated, those who have skills, to be given the capacity to unleash their potential. So it's a question of political decisions at global level, global institutions, regional institutions, and national institutions. Since I have a very limited time, let me go direct to the question that was put to me to say how Rwanda has been able to empower women to be able to be effectively resistant to climate change. There are a number of policies that have been put in place. If you look at the 2017, the Green Growth and Climate Resilience Strategy, it places women at the center of its programs. The 2019 Environment and Climate Change Policy clearly emphasizes the role of women. Our National Strategy for Transformation from 2024 to 2035, you see across the spectrum of all programs and pillars of the strategy, the role of women. So the issue of gender mainstreaming in all these programs is very clear. And what is called gender responsive budgeting is not rhetoric, is not theoretical. In our own situation, you have to make sure that you have clearly shown how this is going to impact on women. Because we have a women minister in planning, we have a women minister in agriculture, women minister in trade and industry, women minister in technology. So everywhere you go, the minister in charge of cabinet affairs in the prime minister's office, everywhere you go, you will find women present there, and they want to verify and check if you have included every single aspect of empowering girls and women. Now, particularly on agriculture and the activities that are undertaken by women, what does an ordinary, normal woman in rural areas in Rwanda do every single day? As the former Secretary General of United Nations put it, they are the masters of our resources because they deal with water resources. The rural woman in Rwanda and any other country that is in developing process, they wake up early in the morning to go and fetch water. How do you help them? So we have had programs to empower women by providing alternative sources of water, like rainwater harvesting systems in place to make sure that they have water, potable drinking water at their homesteads. How about food in agriculture? The support programs that are in place to make sure that they deal with the drought and floods. The programs are in place and are supporting specific women. And you see, for you to be able to achieve this, you have to disaggregate the data and know exactly which groups are affected by what, and therefore you design the program according to a specific problem rather than having an umbrella kind of a program that does not necessarily address specific peculiar challenges that are faced by women. They deal with the forests, they deal with the terrain, the soil conservation, like our country is mountainous, so if you don't empower women with the skills, retooling them, as I said, to make sure they know how they practice the agriculture that is climate smart, they can't be able to practice those techniques. So I think providing skills, making sure that they have access to financing, that's very critical. For instance, those who are in the agribusiness, women, they have what we call BDF, Business Development Fund. Because they don't have the collateral, how do they borrow money to develop their farm so that they are part of the agribusiness and also the whole supply chain. So there are, because of shortage of time, we have a number of tools in place, financial institutions that have created all those resources, the access to property. It was a nightmare for a woman to have a property. Even when you are married, your husband passes away, the in-laws will come and say, sorry, our brother is gone, this is our property. It's not anymore. If I buy a piece of land today, the title is going to be printed showing 50%, James Kimono 50%, the spouse. No question about it. So the access to property also gives them the capabilities to borrow money and be able to develop their farms. Then you add skills, because now when you look at one piece of land, a man is likely to have 15% more productivity than a woman, and therefore what do you do to be able to bridge that gap? So those are the things that we are trying to do, and we are seeing dividends of empowering women, and we are very happy with what's happening in Rwanda. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That was very insightful. May I please now extend to Ms. Beate, please, over to you.
Thank you, Smriti, and let me likewise also start off by thanking UN Women and Center for Globalization, China Center for Globalization, for organizing the event today on International Women's Day. So, Smriti, you had asked me to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing on embedding SDG principles in climate financing and investment, because that's an area where UNDP has been focusing quite a bit under our administrator, Achim Steiner, and how this then in turn can drive gender outcomes in climate action. And other speakers have, of course, already spoken to the importance, why the gender lens in climate action is important. Vulnerability of women, both because of their reliance on natural resources that are affected by climate change, but also vulnerability in the sense that they oftentimes account for a high number of deaths and injuries in climate-induced disasters like floods and other things. But of course, as we were also saying before, women are not only just victims, rather they can actually be very powerful agents of change if they have access to decision-making, like the Rwanda example, in government decision-making positions, and if their views and voices are represented and they have access to resources. So, for example, with proper training and knowledge in technology, economic opportunities linked to climate adaptation and nature conservation, they can actually be a very important part of avoiding natural hazards and making a contribution to climate action. But that also means, in turn, that actually any effective climate policy has to have, for it to be successful, has to have a focus on gender. And I think we have long spoken, and there has been an ask for quite some time that, for example, the nationally determined contributions that countries put forward in terms of their plans to decrease emissions really have to incorporate gender target and that gender lens. And applying then that same logic to finance, it means that investment and financing that underpins these type of policies needs to also be gender sensitive to enable a low carbon transition that is inclusive. So now in China, I think we are presented actually with huge opportunities in that field. China, since 2020, has the biggest green bond market in the world, 11 trillion yuan in green credits, 1 trillion yuan in green bonds. But for this to drive effective, sustainable development that builds in gender, that incorporates gender, I think there is a need to broaden the scope of green finance to finance that aligns with the SDGs. And gender equality needs to be a core principle that informs investment decisions and the financial system to support a low carbon transition that is just and inclusive. Globally, we're seeing similar trends. Sustainable investment has been on the rise. The global market in the developed world is US $30 trillion in sustainable investment assets. But if we look at sustainable investment with a gender lens, or gender lens investing as it's called, it's only 1/4 of that 30 trillion that is currently going into globally sustainable investment. So to leverage basically that potential, UNDP has developed globally SDG impact practice standards for 3 actors in the low carbon transition, namely companies, bond issuers, and equity funds. And connected to these standards, we've also developed a taxonomy that can provide or that provides a concrete categorization of SDG-aligned investment areas. Now, there are 2 features that distinguish these standards from other standards. Firstly, they balance all the 17 SDGs and how they affect each other for a more comprehensive and integrated approach to sustainable and inclusive development, and not just green development. So again, broadening the definition. And because of that, they also particularly identify vulnerable groups and serve vulnerable groups such as women and girls to promote their empowerment. In Indonesia, we've applied this type of logic also to public finance in assessing the gender responsiveness of existing government climate programs, and we've then supported the government there to develop technical guidelines for better integration of gender considerations into climate change budgeting. So I think my key message here for this purpose of this panel is really, we have the tools, we know how to do it, we just need to be a lot more disciplined and systematic about it and approach it in an integrated manner, bringing very much the gender focus into overall standards, into financing, and across our programming to make a dent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was very insightful. May I now please move to Dr. Fan? over to you to tell us why women are important in China in the climate change and environmental protection.
Okay,
Yes.
firstly, happy holidays to all the women in the room, in China and in the world. Today you're supposed to take a leave, holidays. Enjoy yourself. Let men, husbands or boyfriends work for you. So that will be my proposal next year or maybe the year after. Now I have two reasons why I become a champion of the smallholder woman. Smriti said that I'm a champion woman. Number one is my mother was a smallholder farmer in China 40 years ago. I observed how hard she has worked. You know, she had to spend 12 hours, 14 hours a day in farming, but in the meantime, taking lots of time preparing food for us and to make sure that we can go to school with school fees. So she was really a champion. I mean, she died a couple of years ago. I think without her, I wouldn't go to college, I wouldn't go to US, I wouldn't work for International Food Policy Research Institute for 25 years. So my second reason actually was because I worked for the International Food Policy Research Institute for 25 years. I learned so much from our women researchers. So they developed an index called Women Empowerment in Agriculture Index, WEA, that has 6 dimensions, as you all discussed. For example, women's decision in production using inputs, women's control of income, and a woman's time. You know, we have not said much about it. Women spend so much time in preparing foods, in taking care of their children, in addition to farming. And the Green Revolution in China happened in the 70s, actually increased women's time. Instead of 2 crops, we introduced 3 crops. Who is going to work more? It's women. So then leadership, absolutely. So, and income control. Who controls income in your household? Leadership, particularly in community. Not well. I think China made tremendous progress in empowering women, in narrowing the gender gaps. But I think at the local community, there are not hidden gap or hidden discrimination. I just mentioned a couple of things. One is the land rights. On paper, the men and women are entitled to have land. But if you observe, if a woman marries out, moves to outside the village, she's not going to bring that land to different places. If a woman is going to marry in, there will be no new land for her. So hidden discrimination is very critical on land rights. Then access to agricultural and extension services. I think my friend Mathieu will tell you, the smallholder farms do not have access to agricultural extension services because most of the extension agents are men, not women. So as you know, women are not comfortable in talking with the men extension agents. Then lack of access to finance market, as you all mentioned. And women also work proportionally more in informal sector, processing, food transportation, food traders. These are the groups, these are usually not protected, discriminated by many. Now, obviously, lack of decision-making power at the village level. What technologies, what crops they produce. I think there are lots of rooms to be improved, despite the tremendous progress China has made. So how do we move forward from here? We heard that there will be new United Nations from the 2 sessions, proposed new United Nations from the 2 political sessions, protecting women's power and so on. I think equally importantly is to implement them. We introduced lots of regulations and laws, particularly land rights, but we have done a bad job in implementing them, to making sure that women do have equal access to assets. Now, finally, I also wanted to mention a couple of them. One is technology. Currently, I'm a CGIAR board member, the International Global Agriculture Research Network. I think technologies must have a gender lens. When the new technology introduced, it actually requires more time from women. High-yielding crops, or maybe fruits, vegetables, or we want to diversify our food production, that requires more time for women. Let's make sure that they are not going to be, let's say, satisfied because of new technologies. Then research. I think many mentioned that we have a huge gap in research. We do not connect the data they're disaggregated by sex, man and woman. And without that, we can always talk, but without solid evidence. So as a researcher, we wanted to push for that. In my research group, 80% of the researchers are young females, and we really want to empower them to take that issue more seriously. Thank you.